Well, let's turn to Matthew, the 24th chapter tonight. Matthew chapter 24. In Matthew chapter 24, we'll begin at verse 7. It says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved." Now we think about these verses. You know, in my Bible, in the margin, it says conditions in the last age. Well, they've been that way quite a while. I don't think it's necessarily something that's appeared in the last few years. But I will say this, if you look over the last few years, you can find all of verse 7 around the world. Nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines and pestilence and earthquakes in divers places. Seems like earthquakes all over the world. He says those are the beginning of sorrows. And certainly we think about it, the troubles of the world in that way are an awful lot of sorrows. Awful lot of troubles. But then he says, "Then they'll deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." He says, "And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And there will be false prophets, and iniquity shall abound." But you know, he says, "He that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved." Conditions can be all kinds of ways around us. But if you're going to make heaven your home, in spite of the conditions, you must be faithful to God. Amen. And as we consider this thought tonight and the thoughts that we have, we want to realize this. We're not just talking about people doing heroic works to earn themselves a place in heaven. What we're talking about is there's going to be many things happen. You're not going to have control over the conditions about you. You're not going to always have things conducive to what you would like them to be. But you must have it settled in your heart that I'm going with God all the way through. We need it settled that way. It's a thing that we must consider, that iniquity can abound, and the love of some may wax cold. Some may depart from God and go after the world and the things of the world, and some may just go out and be bitter against everything. But if you're going to be saved, you need to be able to endure. And our thought tonight is along the line of patience and endurance. We need to see that the conditions in the world today are certainly in many ways like what he describes here. Maybe we haven't seen people out to kill us yet, but there are people being killed. Maybe we haven't been delivered up to be afflicted yet, but there are people that are. And certainly conditions are such in the world that even within our lifetime, we could see some of those very kinds of things come about. You say, oh, it couldn't happen. Well, you just watch what's going on. It could happen. It could happen. It's happening in other places. Say, oh, but it couldn't happen here. Well, it can happen here. You know, sometimes we know that people have this idea, well, we live in an exceptional nation. Well, the only thing that makes this nation exceptional is when they adhere to the principles of the Word of God. And as we see them being abandoned, we have to recognize that humanity is the same the world over, and some of these conditions could come about here just the same as they could come about anywhere else. But the part we need to see is, I need what it takes to endure to the end. I need such a walk with God that I can be an overcomer. And at the end, hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. We go to James, the 5th chapter, in James chapter 5. In James chapter 5, beginning at verse 7, it says, Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draws nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets who have spoken in the name of the Lord for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. Now in these verses, he is emphasizing that you need to be patient. He said, Be patient, therefore, and use the example of the husbandman, how he plants a crop and he waits a long time for it to grow and be ripe. You know, sometimes we think about just our little garden crops and you just wait a few months for that. But there's things out there that people plant them, and it's going to be a long time before they get anything out of it. We think about it, you decide you want to get in the berry business, it'll maybe take you 2 or 3 years to get something established that you can pick off of. Vineyards don't come around in just an overnight planting. And if you want to have a pecan orchard, you're really going to wait a while for all those trees to grow. But we see that what he's saying is, he says, Be patient, therefore, and then he goes right back, Be ye also patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draws nigh. God is coming back. Time is passing by. And you need whatever it takes to endure. It says that we can look at the prophets. They were a good example of suffering affliction and of patience. But in it all, it points us to Job and says, look, you've seen the end of the Lord. You see that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. He lets you go through some things, but God, God will bring it to a good end if you don't turn aside in the things that you go through. But we need to see there are going to be some things to go through, and we as God's people need to be able to be patient and come through with a victory. In Romans, the 12th chapter, in Romans chapter 12 and verse 12, it has these words. It says, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer. You know, I think you need to be able to be rejoicing in hope, and you need to be instant in prayer if you're going to be patient in tribulation. Now we consider what it says is patient in tribulation, patient in times of trouble. And with that, we want to go to Romans, the 5th chapter, and consider what it says there. In Romans chapter 5, and beginning at verse 1, it says, therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand, and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. But not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation works patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. And hope makes not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost, which is given unto us. Now, here's the interesting thing we want you to notice as we consider the 12th chapter and the 5th chapter here together. The 12th chapter describes how we should be as saints, patient in tribulation. And this chapter says, tribulation works patience. And our thought is this, so if I'm going to be patient in tribulation, where am I going to get it? It sounds like the trouble's going to bring it, but I need it before it starts. Well, that's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? First thing I'd tell you is tribulation don't work patience for everybody. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but tribulation doesn't work patience in everybody. You say, what do you mean? Well, watch people in troubles. There's people that gets into trouble and they aren't a bit patient as they go through the trouble. They're upset, they're angry, they're out of the way. There are all kinds of things in trouble. So we want you to see that just the coming of trouble by itself don't work patience. And yet in our troubles, we need to have patience. You say, well, how that's going to be? Well, for starters, we look at this 5th chapter, and it don't start out just talking about patience. It says, being justified by faith, we have peace with God. We have access by faith into the grace wherein we stand. And because we have that faith, we can glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation works patience. One of the things I want you to see here is you've got to have faith in God for tribulations to work patience. Many times people maybe have that idea, well, the trouble's just come and out of it all I'm going to get patience. If you have faith in God. True. But if you don't have faith in God, you're subject to bucking up and carrying on in all kinds of ways in your troubles. You say, well, why does faith in God make the difference? Well, when I have faith in God, first off, I have peace with God. So I know everything's all right between me and God. You know, Job, as he went through his troubles, he didn't say, he struggled because it's like, where is God? Why is all this happening? He didn't understand it all. And in your troubles, you might say, well, why is all this happening? But you know, he says, God knows the ways that I take. And I know that when He's done, I will come forth as gold. His faith in God is what made the difference in how Job went through the troubles. So you needn't think that patience is going to come without faith. And we're going to look at a verse in James that kind of ties that together. If we go over to James, the first chapter, James puts it this way. Beginning at verse 2 of the first chapter of James, it says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith works patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Now here, James says, the trying of your faith works patience. So the idea we want to see out of Romans, the 12th chapter, is this, that the troubles that come and try your faith can work patience. But your faith must hold in the trial. You must keep your faith in God. We need to see that troubles alone by themselves are not going to make us a better person. It's not the troubles that improves upon us. It is the deepening and the grounding of our faith that makes us better as we go through the troubles. You needn't expect that your patience is going to increase if you have no faith. That God sees all the troubles and He knows what's going on, and it's going to turn out all right. That is how you're going to be patient in tribulation, because your faith is anchored in God. Now, as we consider that thought, one of the thoughts we'd have is this, people read that verse there in Romans, the 5th chapter, and they said, tribulation works patience. And too often the thought that follows for too many people is this, I'm not going to ask for any patience because I don't want any troubles. Well, how many of us pray, Lord, increase my faith? And I'm not going to back away from that. And that means there's going to be some troubles. It's not to our advantage to run from troubles. It's not to our advantage. It's not to our advantage to say, Lord, I got enough troubles in my life. I don't need any more. So I'll just do without any additional patience. It's, Lord, increase my faith, so I'll have what it takes to be patient in this tribulation. Because the writer there in Romans said what? We glory in tribulations. Why? Because in it our faith is made stronger. We are able to in the face of all those things, and he describes here in James, he speaks of divers temptations, but I want you to see that as he speaks of temptations here, he's not speaking of enticements. He's speaking of oppositions. He's speaking of things that come against you. He's speaking of things where you have to resist the devil. Not because he's pointing out some juicy, pretty fruit on a tree, but because he's actively opposing your determination to live for God. But he says, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations. When you confront things that by the way of trouble they seem to strike at your very roots, you can count it all joy as long as you keep your faith grounded in God. That God still knows, that God still cares, that the troubles that came up today didn't change who God was yesterday. He's the same God today. He will be tomorrow, regardless of how the troubles and problems go. God is unchanging. And our faith in God can be fixed that whatever happens, God will see me through it. I think about Jesus, and Peter spoke of that in his writings. He said of Jesus what? He faced the oppositions. But his confidence was that God, however unjust, unfair, out of line it seemed to be, that the judge of the earth would still do right. Now that needs to be our confidence in these troubles and oppositions that come. The judge of the earth will still do right. You say, well, it seems so unfair. Well, you think about Christ going to the cross. That seems so unfair. It didn't seem like any kind of justice was going on there at all. They pretended to have a trial, but the conclusion was decided before the trial started. But still, he had confidence in God, that God was still God. He was doing what God wanted him to do, and the outcome would be what God intended it to be. Well, the outcome we know was the salvation of our soul. He experienced the very seeming abandonment of God, and yet he wasn't abandoned of God. He rose again on the third day. All the things that he had said turned out to be true. All the things God had said, it turned out to be true. All the things that had been prophesied turned out to be true. His confidence in God was unshaken, and it was well placed. So he says here that the trying of your faith works patience. And the way your faith is tried is troubles and difficulties come. Now, in those troubles and difficulties, you need your faith in God to be strengthened. It says, let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. In everything that comes our way, it needs to increase our trust and confidence in God. You say, well, these troubles, I just look for a way out. We don't want to look for just any way out. What do we want to look for? We want to look for God's way through. I mean, you could, kind of as the humor would go, a person swam halfway across the ocean, decided they couldn't make it, turn around and go back. Sad to say, sometimes in people in their spiritual experience, it's about the same way. Halfway through, they give up and go back. They've already been through enough that if they just be faithful, they can make it the rest of the way through. God has grace for the things that we face. And God has the power to work things out in His own way. We don't always maybe understand it. And I will tell you this, in your troubles, you're all going to be at times going, God, why? And in some of your troubles, God's going to say, that's not for you to know about right now. Just be faithful. Just be faithful. And our whys many times maybe challenge our faith, but I want you to see that whether you can explain why or not, and Job reached the point, he says, man, I reach this way, and I reach that way, and I reach that way, and I reach that way, and that way, and that way, and I just can't seem to find God. But I have to accept that he never came to the point, he said, God has got it all messed up. He don't know what he's doing anymore. He's lost his way and can't figure out what to do. He still knew that I have to keep my confidence that God will see me through. And we need that same confidence. I've got to keep my confidence that God will see me through. I've got to keep my confidence that God will avenge His elect when He sees it's appropriate. But God also many times uses these tribulations, these troubles. If we can be patient in tribulation, God can use them to show Himself strong to others. But we need patience. We need to let it have its perfect work. We need to let it do what God intended for it to accomplish. But above everything else, we need to have it settled that I'm not going to let go of God, and I will endure to the end. We go to 1 Peter, the first chapter. In 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning at verse 3, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which according to His abundant mercy hath begotten us again unto a lively hope by the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled, that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you, who are kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now ye see Him not, yet believing, ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Now we consider the words of Peter here. He says that he blesses God, which according to His abundant mercy hath begotten us to a lively hope by the resurrection of Christ from the dead. And He's brought us to an inheritance incorruptible and undefiled that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you. So you got your inheritance there in heaven. You've been begotten again by Christ. You're kept by the power of God through faith unto salvation, ready to be revealed in the last time. All of those things are there, and we can count on them to be there. The mercy of God, the inheritance, the salvation, all of those things have been brought to us by Jesus Christ. And we rejoice in those. You find most people are glad and quickly rejoice about the fact they're going to heaven, about the fact that they're accepted by God, and it should be cause for rejoicing. Though He says, for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations. You might endure some things that don't make you want to leap and shout. But though we have manifold temptations, we have various things that would come to resist us in our walk of God, we still need to be faithful to God. Even if sometimes it don't feel all like, shouting and leaping. And maybe you're going to feel sometimes pretty put down by it all. But we can't walk on those feelings. We got to walk by faith. He says that the trial of your faith might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. We consider that verse 7, it speaks to the trial of your faith. It says, being more precious than gold that perishes, and that's describing the value of your faith. Your faith is more precious than gold, though it be tried by fire. And gold, you establish the value of gold in part by trying it by fire. You take gold and you put it in the heat, and if it's 100% pure, there's not going to be any impurities rise to the top because it's 100% pure. If it's got a lot of stuff mixed in, the heat, it'll rise to the top, and you'll find out that what you're being offered is not pure gold. And faith is kind of the same way. Faith is of great value, but it needs to be faith that can stand up to the trial. It needs to be faith that can hold on in the face of things that challenge and question it. We think about the writings of Peter and James and Paul and the various ones, and it would have been a wonderful thing for them to write about the glories of what they experienced with the coming of Christ and the salvation they enjoyed in their soul and the wonderful workings and the results that they saw going forth. But their faith did begin to be challenged, because it wasn't long till they were also experiencing persecutions. There were people that were dying for it. And as I consider that, one of the things that we see, it says here that the trial of your faith may be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. The very fact that they had that kind of faith is a strong testimony to the reality of who Jesus Christ was. You say, why? Well, if they weren't convinced that He was the Christ, the Son of God, I can't picture them enduring those things. We think about what people would give their life for today, and I don't know anybody that would gladly step up and say, this is a lie, but I'll give my life for it. They were convinced of the truth of who Christ was. Their faith was unshakable that He was the Christ, the Son of the living God. They had seen things beyond compare. They had, by the Spirit, had revealed to them how that the various aspects of Christ's life fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament. And the trying of their faith established that they weren't just men with a new religion. They were men that had seen the Son of God. And they were convinced and willing to go through whatever came their way, because they had encountered the Christ. And for His sake, they were ready and willing to do whatever needed to be done. Well, it's a wonderful thing, and it certainly gives us reason for our faith in Christ to be strengthened, to know that these that were so personally acquainted with Him had such confidence in Him. But in our day and time, there still needs to be those that the trial of their faith still will be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Our faith needs to hold just as strong. And Peter was encouraging the people with the thought that whom having not seen ye love, and whom though now ye see Him not, yet believing ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. What he was saying was, we saw Christ and we're this strongly convinced. We're ready to go through everything to stand by Jesus Christ and the message that He has come, the Savior of mankind. But he says it's even more wonderful, you haven't seen Him. You weren't personally introduced to Him the way we were. And it's wonderful that your faith stands up to the trial. And it's wonderful today that our faith can stand up to the trial. We weren't there 2,000 years ago, and maybe we couldn't personally handle and experience some of the things the way they experienced them. But our faith in God can be just as strong, that Jesus is the Christ. He is the one. Certainly there's religion come since then. And some people are committed to that. And you can go where you want to with that. But my thought is this: out of all the things in the world, I need to have it settled in my heart that Jesus is the Christ. And to have such a faith and confidence of what He has done in my heart that I can stand true to God in the face of whatever comes. Now, I don't need to spend my time. I don't need to spend my time necessarily pondering all of the things listed there in the 24th chapter of Matthew, the earthquakes, the wars, the people turning on each other, the whole list of things. You know, I don't really have to contemplate all of that. What I need to realize is that I must get it settled, my faith in God, such that if any of that comes, I will endure it and still stay true to God. We don't maybe have some of those things today. The wars are going on, but you know, we as a nation, we seem to be kind of indifferent about the wars that are being fought, which many would say is a bad thing. That the nation should be committed to what it is we as a nation are attempting to do. But that's kind of doesn't come real close to us at times. And earthquakes, you know, I understand they happen here, but I don't notice them too much. Maybe someday I will. They say it could get bad someday. But you know, I don't have to spend all my time sitting and worrying about all those possibilities. What I need is to build my faith in God such that it will be stronger than all those possibilities. That it will be able to keep me through whatever comes. And interestingly enough, I won't build it probably by tomorrow facing the threat of imminent death. But by tomorrow being able to endure petty injustices. And still just say, well, God, if that's, if I need to bear this, just help me to bear it. By facing iniquity among people and just say, well, God, if that's what goes on in the world, you know about that. But in all those things that maybe in comparison to what we read there in the 24th chapter of Matthew, in all those things that seem small and insignificant by comparison, I still need the faith to be an overcomer. And as I overcome those, certainly I can build the faith to be able to endure bigger and more difficult things. But in all those things, it's not the greatness of my works. It's not heroism of my acts. It's my faith in God that's important. That I won't let go of Him. That I won't be turned aside from Him. That in the troubles I find in Him the grace to endure and to overcome. And as it describes there, it didn't just say that we make it through, but He said we glory in tribulations. And the reason for the glorying is because I've found something that takes me through them the way I need to go through it. And it is my faith in God, my trust in Him. Oh, I realize as people we may often say, Lord, increase my faith. As we confront things, it might be that, sometimes they disturb us, they trouble us, they seem to shake us. But in those things, I always come back to, Lord, increase my faith. Give me that faith that will help me to take hold. And being tried by fire, to come out on the other side unto praise and honor and glory for Jesus Christ. Now he speaks of the appearing of Christ, and I believe in one sense he's referring to His return, but at the same time I'd say this, it's unto praise and honor and glory when Christ and His working in our heart and life appears such that others can see He's there. We need patience. But I tell you, don't expect troubles alone to bring it. You got to have faith in God. We would encourage you that way, that builds your faith. Because that's what adds a lot of other things to you. In the 5th chapter there, he said, faith, we got hope, and then we got patience, and we got experience, and we can glory because hope makes not ashamed. You need other places where it says you add here and here and here, but faith in God is the foundation of all those good things that we have in our life from God. There's going to be plenty of things that come and try and test it. There's going to be plenty of things that try to shake it. But he says the trial of your faith, which is more precious than gold, though it's tried with fire, that faith is the most valuable thing you can have. Don't let it go. Realize faith has gotten people through all kinds of things. You read the 11th chapter of Hebrews, faith got people through all kinds of things. I don't know anything else that'll get you through like faith in God. You say, well, I just thought if I had enough money. Sometimes people get all wrapped up in money. I'll tell you what, I'd a whole lot rather have a strong faith in God and be broke than a whole bunch of money. Why? Because faith in God has taken people through so many things that money never would have worked. But because they kept their confidence in God, they were able to cry out to God. They were able to find help from God. And God was able to work out the troubles. He was able to change the situations. You can in this world, you can take money and go out and buy off a lot of folks, but there's a lot of situations you just can't change that way. And we know that that's a corrupt way of doing anyway, but our thought is this: God can turn things around. God can change stuff. We could look at nation warring against nation, and God can change the outcome. God can bring peace where there isn't peace. God can help people in so many ways. But without faith, all is lost. All is lost. So we look at it and we say this: we have need of patience that we might endure some things. Let patience have her perfect work. Let us be able to be patient in tribulation and go through things such that God would be glorified. But realize that the battle is about your faith, that you keep your faith in God, because it so changes what the outcome will be, whether you keep your faith in God or you let go of Him. Don't ever let go. So we sang that song, and never give up. Never give up. I believe Fanny Crosby wrote that, and I'm sure at times, as a blind person, there was things that struggled, and she undoubtedly had plenty of times in her life to ask why. But she still could see, never give up on God. Because God, our faith in Him, that is more valuable and more important than anything else. We're going to have resistance. We're going to have opposition. We're going to have things to overcome. We're going to experience injustice, ill treatment. You're going to see some of that in the world. But if you keep faith in God, you just stay true to Him, you can come out on top all that. There's plenty of folks that have. Plenty of folks where people would write them off and go, that one's a loser. But God brought them through. And God can do the same for us if we keep our faith and let the trial of it work patience in our life.